We are the Catalan Independentist Resistance, and you are listening to a new update from Radio Hadrian in Free Catalonia.
Something it is not just or fair because it is a law. It must become law because it is fair. Montesquieu. Good afternoon, this is David Rabantos. This is chapter 67 of Radio Hadrian, reaching you thanks to Cheryl Scott and K Radio from Barcelona in Free Catalonia. This has been a peculiar week. It's been a happy week for the resistance. We've done live conference. We have agreements to do 3 public presentations in medium cities in Catalonia. We are gathering support, and we are quite happy with the way things go inside our movement. It is not the same with the way the Catalan process goes, though. And this is a week that marks the 4th anniversary of the Scottish referendum or Riggarendum. And this will be an important issue for us this week. We'll start by the memory of that referendum that happened 4 years ago, that links to a parallel story about Arque Vives and Paluzie, which have been snubbed in Twitter this week by members of the Catalan resistance in the presence of Mike Small of Bella Caledonia. Then we'll move to an interview with Carles Puigdemont and some television joke, which was not so much of a joke, about how the Catalan process is going. Also to pinpoint how Esquerra Republicana and Oriol Junqueras are pushing for Scottish-style referendum to murder Catalan independence. We'll talk about Roger Español. Roger Español is the Catalan guy I've had the privilege of meeting a couple of weeks ago. He plays the saxo in a band called Soweto, and he lost one eye due to rubber bullet the 1st of October 2017. To add injury to assault, he's been prosecuted by Spain about it seems some minor tribal incidents happening the same day. We, as Director 68, we have done a communication of total support to Roger Español, and we'll talk a bit about controlled opposition, and we'll talk about the case. We are trying to speak about children every week, and this week is about the case of Kote Cabezudo, which shows how rotten everything in Spain is, and specifically the lack of division of powers. This program is dedicated to Montserrat Vilaró Berenguer, one of the first persons to support me in Facebook, while everybody else was attacking me for denouncing that this process wouldn't bring independence, as the time has shown. And also to her uncle Quintí Coll Alsina, which was murdered by the Franco troops, fusilated, executed without court in 1939, and he is in a mass grave in La Pedrera. Okay, this program goes dedicated to the two. The first thing is to look back to those days in September, 18th of September 2014. I remember the song I Voted Yes, and I remember how fired up I was. I was innocent then, still. I had already discovered that everything in Catalonia was a lie, but somehow going to different ways, because sometimes it's easy to spot the problems in someone else's head. I knew that everything was rotten in Catalonia, but somehow I was still naive, and I still didn't know that this is a new world order system that doesn't want any nation belonging to NATO or European Union to regain freedom. This is not to separate. This is not to anything. We were free 300 years ago, and we want our freedom back, both Scotland and Catalonia. And I was fired up, and I remember I got so many Facebook Scottish friends. I met Delia around the time of the referendum, and I knew it would have happened. You would be independent hadn't it been for all the tricks. And I don't mean the devolution promises and the vow and all these things. These things are not the tricks. They are tricks, of course, but those are just smokescreen to cover the big trick. The big trick, as we've been maintaining in this program, and as it should be obvious to everybody, as far as Nicola Sturgeon and Alex Salmond belong to the Queen's Council, is that you've been infiltrated to the highest places. That's why the Edinburgh Agreement allowed for such loopholes. That's why Alex Salmond conceded defeat in the first hours and then he quit. He didn't want to take attention away from the fact that he was accepting defeat. That's not, normally he should have quit the same time, but he wanted to do it 2 times during the same day. At first I wanted to trust him. I thought, oh, he's been threatened in between. No way. He was part of the plan all along. And they gave the right to pick up the votes to IDOCs, as you know, with the CEO Peter Liley, back then member of Tories in Westminster. And we've seen the lack of exit polls and how in the dream will never end, this, let's call it book, this diary Alex Salmond wrote about 100 days to the referendum. He says, oh, now I realize we should have done exit polls, but it's not so important, is it? What a way to cover the hopes of independence after 300 years, smothered just by that incidental sentence, oh, we should have done exit polls. Yeah, well, you should have, and you didn't, so you're a traitor, Alex Salmond. And you know all about the blank bullets that were given to Naomi Wolf in a public rally, and she gave them to Tommy Sheridan. And it might be me, but I've never heard of those affidavits saying that there were blank ballots anymore. And we've seen Ruth Davidson on television live accepting to tampering with postal votes, and we've seen Humza Yousaf, the friend of Arque and Vives Paluzie, we'll talk about later. We've seen him look at his nails while Ruth Davidson was admitting to tampering with postal votes. The betting on something that was supposed to be split even shows without a shadow of doubt that it was rigged. And Scottish government, SNP, Nicola Sturgeon, Alex Salmond and everybody else is not such completely idiotic as not to know. It is something, and we need to break this divide between the people who's awake and people who's not. Everybody over a certain intelligence and over a certain awareness realized that people betting almost £1 million to say there would be a no on something that was split even is acting on inside information. It would have stopped betting on any sports competition where things are supposed to be evenly divided, and the betting pays 3 times better for one of the 2 things happening. That means inside information. But on top of that, if that incredible quota where it was paid 3 times better the yes than the no, that means all the betting houses in the world knew it was to be a no because the votes were already counted. You know what Stalin said? It's not the votes that counts, it's the one who counts the votes. The votes were probably already counted. People of Scotland voted in some ballot boxes, and the boxes that were counted were some other boxes. The system is rotten. The system of not counting locally is one of the three main guarantees to avoid a referendum being rigged. And then, of course, you need a chain of custody. Here, you don't do any of the three basic guarantees. You were stolen independence in your own noses by your beloved ones. And all your media, including Bella Caledonia, saying that the referendum was rigged were conspiracy theorists and all these things. You've been betrayed by your own side. And you need to overcome cognitive dissonance, and you need to look what's going on in Catalonia to know that. Happily, we have managed to, it was styled, we're doing a documentary about Scotland, Catalonia, and mental manipulation. And it's going to be ready in the next month. And it explains how independence was stolen from Scotland by their own side. And that is obvious to everyone looking at what happened. That it was rigged, it's obvious. The way betting went, we have everything. We have the opinions of people on the same day saying that they only saw yesers. The way that only a bunch of people marched in George Square the day after the referendum to inspire fear on people against UDI. The way Westminster pushed for everybody to join SNP in social media the days after that. How the National came into life not before the referendum to help win it, but after that. And how National belongs to Gannett Group. Gannett Group with severe tie, with big ties with CIA, with Trident, with Lockheed Martin. Because they've shared CEO with Lockheed Martin in the past. All those things show to whoever who has the interest and the free thinking to look into it long enough to find out that not only was the Scottish referendum rigged, but it was rigged by your own side. How could nobody handle boxes with votes without being counted to IDOCs? You didn't stand a chance because your beloved party, your beloved leader, and your beloved media worked for the enemy. And that's why we oppose, here from Resistència Independentistacat, Catalana, Ràdio, and Directa 68, we fiercely oppose the Scottish-style Riggarendum that the so-called pro-indie parties, the so-called pro-indie panelists are trying to push down our throats. We are gonna oppose a Scottish-style Riggarendum with everything we've got. So we wanted to remember how independence was stolen from Scotland 4 years ago. We are meeting people from the Basque resistance this month, and people in Basque country will have to swallow as big a toad as you Scottish people will have to, and as we Catalans are having to. We are already thousands of people who are aware that we've been betrayed by our own side, and soon we're going to be millions. This week has come out the video we made on the commemoration of 11th of September, not the American one, the Catalan one. I don't want to be bombed saying, oh, they're celebrating. No, we're commemorating the people that died in defending the city of Barcelona 304 years ago. And people are waking up to the fact that we've been sold by our own side. And hard as it is, you need to come to the same conclusion. You need to come to the conclusion that SNP is heavily infiltrated and run from London. The Scottish referendum in 2014 was rigged and robbed by your own side. And only UDI will bring independence. Something else going on is Brexit. We've spoken about that before. The movement seems that Brexit will never happen. It was never meant to happen. Brexit in this 1 and 2, first Brexit, but then possibly a second referendum to revoke Brexit, will serve to keep the countries in Northern Europe that wanted to get out of the European Union in, because they've been shown the real problems of trying to leave. And secondly, it shows how Soros and other people can influence things into making anything happen. You know that Soros have been exerting influence and peddling money to try to get a second referendum, pushing influence in the labor seats that voted Brexit, and in most of these places people would vote staying now. So if you have some money to bet, the same way as it was a safe bet to bet for Scotland staying in UK against the will of the Scottish people, well, if you have some money to bet it on Brexit never happening, because it was never meant to happen. And then with Brexit not happening, then they will use that as an excuse to not have a second Scottish referendum, and that will seal the fate. So for those of you who want independence both from the UK and European Union, hard times ahead. But the good news is you have some friends in Catalonia and in Basque Country, and soon hopefully in Ireland as well, which are fighting to overcome this bunch of traitors that are in the movement. Related to this story, Arque, who happens to be a contributor of Bella Caledonia, but is for a long time she's known to be a Spanish mole or New World Order mole to avoid Scottish independence and Catalan independence and in other places. She runs an organization called ISEC, which reunites also people from South Tyrol, Veneto, Basque Country, Catalonia, Flanders, and all those people, I assume, are working for their enemies, because, well, I've seen them work, and they're all very big friends with Arque, which happens to be a higher placed New World Order mole. So this Arque was cheeky enough to put a picture in her Twitter, putting her together with Joan Vives Paluzie, her current husband, a long-term mole for 25 years, and Elisenda Paluzie, ex-girlfriend of her husband, and now she has been placed at the top of Assemblea Nacional Catalana, which is the grassroots movement for independence, but actually was set up by Spain to neutralize independence. And it's good because it's the first time we have a picture of the trio, I think. It's very difficult to find pictures of Joan Vives. And they have the cheek to say that they went there as international observers. Clarification, being an international observer means that you are one of the people that guarantees that things get rigged. We need to understand that we live in this mirror world where the things are the contrary what we think them to be. So international observers are not in places to avoid rigging. They are there to make sure the rigging happens, but to offer an image of justice to the outside world. The interesting thing is, well, these three people I mentioned, Elisenda Paluzie, she was cheeky enough to bring Stephen Noon, the head of the Yes campaign in the referendum, to lie to people in Catalonia. And when I started outing the blank ballots, the betting, the postal voting, the no exit polls, the guy almost collapses, and so did Elisenda Paluzie. So the links of these three to murder Catalan and Scottish independence are big. The other one, this Arque, I happened to meet her in a political party. Very briefly, I was her second in charge for international relationships in a party, Solidaritat Catalana. Later on, I've discovered this Solidaritat Catalana was an infiltration of Spain in independentism. And she happens to be a collaborator of Bella Caledonia. Mike Small was present in this thread. And she also ran away from Delia and me, as we mentioned before in this program, when Shona McAlpin was lying to people about exit polls and things in Barcelona. So we've got them red-handed twice. And her husband, Joan Vives, was there at the back. So these three people that appeared as observers there, we have been getting them red-handed in public appearances. They also are very big friends of Angus Brendan McNeill, the guy who prefers being in bed with in hotels while other people's were canvassing for independence in Scotland, but why should he? If he's a friend of these people and highly placed in the SNP, he already knew independence would never happen because he knew beforehand that the referendum was rigged. So what was the need to lose the opportunity to have some sex on the taxpayers' money? Because there was a referendum that was already doomed, isn't it, Angus? So the interesting is that this thing, in the presence of Mike Small, happened that they had to shut up and disappear. Because people knowing that the Scottish referendum was rigged started appearing in force and the threat of anarchy, so she had to shut up and disappear. And that shows how the truth is very strong. These people are very well connected with the powers that be. This anarchy, this Arque Vives, this Hadrian Paluzie. Hadrian Paluzie is an accomplice of me being tortured and kidnapped. Of course, I cannot bring it to court because they run everything. The system runs everything. She was working for the system. She was working for Spain when she collaborated with it. So what would be the point of denouncing her? But the important thing is that Twitter and other social media opens a small door. Of course, it's run by our enemies. Of course, they have thousands of trolls passing as pro-indie people, both in Scotland and Catalonia. But this tiny battle won in Twitter, it's the way to go because we have the truth and they don't. These people, this anarchy, this Hadrian Paluzie, this Arque Vives, were trying to tell the people that the Scottish referendum was right and the way to go. And we showed the people watching that threat the opposite to be the truth. So it was a small victory for Scotland, small victory for Catalonia, mainly a small victory for truth. Truth is on our side, and if we persevere, we'll get independence both in Scotland and Catalonia. If I didn't believe that, I wouldn't have done a hunger strike for the independence of Catalonia and Scotland 2 years ago. Very briefly, issues related to the Catalan process this week. Former President Carles Puigdemont has made an interview in a newspaper in Flanders called Het Belang van Limburg, in which he has let out that he'll be able to come back to Catalonia before 20 or 30 years because Catalonia will be the bed by then, which is a clear mockery in our face. If you add to that Polonia, a humor program, has made a gag in which he appears as an illusionist, where he shows in our face how he's been lying to us in all the main things for the last years, it means that they are laughing at our faces to the pro-indie people. And more important thing is that Esquerra Republicana is pushing for a Scottish-style referendum, which the real independentists won't accept. Director 68 has made a communication in which we oppose strongly the legal action taken by Spain against Roger Español, a guy I was lucky to meet 2 weeks ago, who lost one eye with a rubber bullet. We stated that we support him completely. Second, that the only actions that need to be analyzed is the violence against helpless civil population. Third, we don't recognize the authority of any Spanish court. For once we get independence through Directive 68, we're gonna annul all political sentences coming from Spain, and we're gonna ask indemnization for the things happening the last 300 years. An important thing, but time is running out, but one important thing I've outlined in the Catalan and Spanish versions is the case of Kote Cabezudo. Thanks to lawyer Mario Diez, we've discovered a case of sex abuse, rape, child pornography that has been going on for 30 years in the city of San Sebastian in the Basque Country. He made a video that went viral. He's defending 16 of the 22 victims that have come out. It was something very fishy where the relationship with the photo models and this photographer, he blackmailed teenagers to have sex with him, who was already 60, between 60 and 70. We've read stories of young people destroyed because of this situation. But the worst thing is that has been covered by jury, by court, by bankers, by high-placed politicians. One of them is in Spanish Parliament, but they have this system of immunity. that is making things very difficult. We are trying to make this case known in Catalonia, where some people or a lot of people know it, but a lot of people does not know it. We want not only to be independent, but we want a country where children are protected, children anywhere in the world. We're going to talk about the abuses on the BBC some other weeks. But this case of Kote Cabezudo, we want everybody to know the same case as with the abuse on Aboriginal children in Scotland, in Australia, or the abuses in anywhere in the world. It's been a pleasure of always being with you. It's been nice to have a mainly Scottish program this week, but never forget that when we fight to unveil the scandal, the treason in the Catalan process, Scottish independence will be around the corner. So when we're fighting for Catalan independence, we're fighting for Scottish independence as well. We are winning. We're going to win this. Visca Catalunya lliure. Saor Aluba Gubra.
This has been another update from the Catalan Independentist Resistance from Radio Hadrian. Remember that you can follow us on social media, either on Facebook, YouTube, our Twitter account, Instagram, Google, Telegram, and also on iVoox.